When people think about childhood trauma, they think about things that happened, the arguments they can still hear, the moments that left visible marks, the events they can point to and say, that is where something broke. But there is another kind of wound that works completely differently. It is not defined by what happened, it is defined by what never did. No one comforted you when you cried and didn't understand why. No one asked what you were feeling and actually waited for the answer. No one reflected your emotions back to you so you could learn to recognize them as real. The absence of those things leaves no visible scar. It leaves something harder to find and harder to name. And the children who grow up in that absence do not usually know anything is wrong. They simply adapt. They build habits that look from the outside like strengths, like maturity, like admirable independence. And they carry those habits into adulthood, never connecting them to what they actually are. Survival strategies for a child who had to figure out how to need less. Today, I want to show you what some of those habits look like. Not to make you feel broken, but because understanding where they came from is the first real step toward finally being able to put them down. Society calls this self-sufficiency. It praises you for it. You are the one who figures things out alone. The one who handles a personal crisis without calling anyone, the one who would never dream of admitting out loud that you cannot manage something by yourself. From the outside, this looks like strength. From the inside, it is something else entirely. When a child reaches out consistently and meets indifference, distraction, or irritation instead of a response, the brain makes a calculation quietly, below the level of conscious thought. The calculation goes like this: asking for help leads to rejection. Therefore, I must become my own source of everything. This is not self-sufficiency. This is a fortress built around a very specific wound. The wound of having needed something and been left to need it alone. As an adult, when you refuse help, you are not just being capable. You are protecting yourself from the specific pain of having a need and watching it go unmet. The fortress keeps you safe. It also keeps everyone out. And the loneliness inside it is something that your independence, however real and impressive it is, cannot fix. Someone asks how you feel about something, and your mind goes completely blank. Not because you are being evasive, not because you are hiding something, but because you genuinely do not know. In psychology, this is called alexithymia, a disconnection between your body's emotional signals and your conscious awareness of them. Here's how it develops. In a healthy childhood, parents act as emotional mirrors. A parent says something like, "You are feeling frustrated because that did not work the way you wanted." That sentence does something invisible and essential. It connects the physical sensation the child is experiencing to a word, a label, a thing that can be named and therefore understood and processed. In a home where emotions were ignored or treated as inconvenient, that mirroring never happens. The child's feelings exist, but they go unnamed, unacknowledged, useless. So the child learns to disconnect, to mute the inner world, because feeling it produces nothing. As an adult, this becomes a life lived at a slight remove from yourself. You watch other people seem deeply connected to their passions and their pains, and you wonder what that feels like from the inside. You are not cold, you are not shallow. You simply had the wires between sensation and language quietly severed, before you were old enough to know they were supposed to be connected. You were 5 minutes late, and you give a 3-minute account of exactly why. You bought a specific thing, and you justify the choice to someone who did not ask. You make a decision and immediately build a case for why it was the logical and defensible one. From the outside, this looks like conscientiousness. From the inside, it is something older than that. When a child grows up in an environment where their needs and preferences were not inherently respected, they learn that having a want requires justification, that making a mistake requires a defense, that existing without a fully articulated explanation for every choice invites dismissal or criticism. So you learn to pre-defend yourself, to construct the argument before anyone asks, to make sure your choices are airtight before anyone has the chance to call them into question. You are not explaining yourself to the person in front of you. You are explaining yourself to a ghost from your past, a parent who never gave you the basic permission to simply be, to choose, to exist without having to earn that existence through logic. You apologize when someone walks into you. You apologize for asking a question in a meeting. You apologize for your home being slightly imperfect before a guest has even stepped through the door. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. For things that are not your fault, for things that are not mistakes at all, for the simple act of existing in a room and occasionally needing something from it. This is not politeness. This is what happens when a child internalizes deep below the level of conscious thought that their presence is an imposition. If you grew up with parents who were perpetually exhausted, disengaged, or simply uninterested, you learned to shrink. You learned that the safest way to exist was to require as little space as possible, to be low maintenance, to never cost anyone anything they were not already freely offering. Every apology is a small version of the same sentence. I'm sorry for needing anything here. It is the voice of a child who was taught, without a single explicit lesson, that their needs came second to the comfort of the adults around them. Stop here for a moment, because something needs to be said before we continue. If you are recognizing yourself in these habits, I want to be very clear about something. There is nothing wrong with you. There never was. Your brain did exactly what it was designed to do. It looked at the environment it was in, and it adapted. It built strategies to keep you as safe and as functional as possible in a situation that was asking too much from a child who had no other options. These habits were not character flaws. They were survival tools, and they worked. They got you here. But they were built for a world that no longer exists. And the weight of carrying them into a life where you are no longer that child is starting to cost you things you deserve to have. Stay with me. You are remarkably good at reading a room. You can sense a shift in someone's mood before they have registered it themselves. You adjust your tone, your opinions, your personality, the entire presentation of yourself to match whoever you are with. From the outside, this looks like social intelligence. In reality, for someone who grew up with emotional neglect, this is hypervigilance wearing the costume of charm. When a child's home does not provide a stable emotional baseline, the child becomes an expert at monitoring the adults around them. Not out of curiosity, out of necessity. They needed to know what mood the room was in before they could know whether it was safe, whether this was a moment they could ask for something, whether the ground was stable enough to stand on. You became a mirror because having a solid self did not feel safe. And now, as an adult, you move through the world incredibly skilled at reflecting other people back to themselves. But in the quiet moments alone, a question surfaces. Who am I when no one is watching? The fact that the question is hard to answer is not a mystery. It is the direct result of never having your own traits and emotions reflected back to you during the years when identity was being formed. Did I say the wrong thing in that conversation? Do my friends actually like me, or are they just tolerating me? Was that decision the right one, or am I missing something obvious? The second guessing never fully stops. Not for small things, not for large ones. This is what happens when a child's reality is consistently denied by the people who are supposed to confirm it. When you said, "I'm sad," and heard, "No, you're not, you're just tired." When you expressed a feeling and it was dismissed, ignored, or explained away, you learned that your internal compass was unreliable, that the signals you were receiving from inside yourself could not be trusted. And you started looking outside yourself for confirmation that what you were perceiving was real. That pattern does not disappear when childhood ends. It follows you into every decision, every relationship, every moment where you need to trust what you know and feel. The chronic self-doubt is not a personality trait. It is the absence of the one thing a child needs most to develop confidence. A parent who consistently said, "Yes, I see what you see. I believe what you feel. Your inner world is real. You are the one people call, the therapist friend, the reliable one, the person who shows up, who listens, who helps carry what others cannot carry alone." And when you are in crisis, you vanish. You do not call anyone. You handle it alone, or you do not handle it at all. But either way, you do it without reaching toward another person. This is not because you are stoic. It is because somewhere in your childhood, you discovered that the only way to receive a positive response from the people who were supposed to care for you was to be useful. Maybe you took care of others in your family. Maybe you became the emotional support for a parent who needed you to play that role. Maybe you simply noticed that being helpful produced warmth, while being needy produced withdrawal, and you learned the lesson. Your value lives in what you do for people, not in who you are. This creates a life that looks from the outside like remarkable generosity, and feels from the inside like a debt you can never stop paying. Because receiving care does not feel like love. It feels like a trap. You wait for what is expected in return. You tell yourself you do not deserve it. You find reasons to give it back or deflect it entirely, and you remain, in the middle of all your relationships, fundamentally alone. Hyper-independence that is really a fortress against being let down. Emotional numbness that developed when feelings produced no response. Overexplaining, born from never being allowed to simply be. Constant apology for the crime of existing. A self that shifts to match every room because having a fixed self felt dangerous. Distrust of your own judgment because the people who should have confirmed it consistently denied it. A life of giving that cannot receive because receiving was never safe. These are not personality flaws. They are not things that are wrong with you. They are the completely predictable adaptations of a child who needed more than they were given and found ways to survive anyway. But the environment that created them no longer exists, and the survival gear you have been wearing for decades is starting to cost you the very things you have always wanted most. Real connection, the ability to be seen in your wholeness. The freedom to have needs without shame. Healing from this does not start with a dramatic transformation. It starts with almost invisible steps. Saying, I would prefer the Italian place, instead of I don't care, you pick. Waiting 5 seconds before apologizing for something that was not your fault. Letting someone help you carry something, even when you could manage it alone. These habits were armor, and that armor kept you safe when you were too young to have any other option. You are allowed to thank it for that. You are allowed to put it down now. You are allowed to be seen, to be heard, to have needs that the people who love you will not experience as burdens. They will experience them as a chance to love you the way you deserve to be loved from the beginning. You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were a child who deserved to be noticed. And you still do. Which of these habits felt closest to your own experience? Drop it in the comments. Because naming it is not weakness. It is the first real act of seeing yourself the way someone should have seen you a long time ago. And if someone in your life carries this weight without knowing where it came from, share this with them, because understanding it changes everything.